What's the starting point for a business if they're trying to implement AI systems and automation?
It is policies. What do you want to protect? And that's a process. This is the kind of things that shouldn't happen. This is my AI acceptable usage policy. And then it's the enforcement of it, which is your platform.
You're listening to Stimulus Tech Talk, a conversation based podcast created by Stimulus Technologies that covers a range of topics related to business and technology.
Hello, and welcome to Stimulus Tech Talk. I'm Nathan Whittacre, CEO of Stimulus Technologies, and we're really excited today to talk a little bit more about AI with Joe Turso. So welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
It's a pleasure. So I'm really excited about this conversation. Anytime we get to talk about AI and AI for business, it's exciting to me. So let me read a little bio about Joe and why he's here. So Joe is the CEO of High Point Group, where he helps tech-driven businesses scale smarter by aligning people, platforms, processes, and performance. With more than 30 years in the IT industry, we share that in common, 30 years. Joe has worked through every major shift in technology from early internet systems to today's AI powered automation. His work focuses on helping businesses remove operational bottlenecks, build repeatable systems, and use automation in practical ways that support real growth. Through High Point Group and My Agent Hive, Joe is also helping businesses adopt AI safely and strategically with a focus on governance, security, and long term value. And Joe is a frequent speaker, educator, and advisor on AI, automation, and operational excellence. So to start out, Joe, I just want to ask you: we've been in the industry about 30 years,
Mhm.
so we must be around the same age. What was your first computer that you worked on?
TSR 80 or
Okay.
the Commodore 64. I mean, that really wasn't a computer because we had to do program and record it on cassette tape.
Went a little different track. Mine was an Atari 800 XL was my first computer at home. And,
Yeah.
so very similar though, it's
Mhm.
I still have mine
Do you
from
really?
yeah, from 40 years ago. Still have it sitting in my garage. I need to hook it up sometime and play around with it. Last time I hooked it up, it still worked.
That's
Uh,
amazing. That's built tough.
yeah, it's pretty amazing how technology has shifted over 30 years. And
Mhm.
I think those of us have been in the industry for a while have a different perspective because like he's in your bio, the businesses has shifted multiple times over the last, 30
Mhm.
years. And, I think when we talk about AI, we have to worry about business processes and different things. So how, when you're trying to implement AI in a business, why is it difficult? And you have a statement here where AI won't fix broken business processes. So
Mhm.
talk to us about what that means for businesses.
So I have a standard saying that if you can't do it manually, you can't automate it, right? So when we talk about my four P's, the people, process, platform, and performance, it does all start with the people, right? Is do we have clear ownership and do we have accountability? Because without that, right, we're going to get random results, and that creates hallucination, that creates bad information, that makes AI difficult to use, and you won't see ROI. So it all starts with the ownership and accountability. Because if I can do this and I get repeatable results and I can document the process, then I can automate it. Then I can analyze it. Right. Two things come out of it is structured data and documented processes. Anybody should be able to be backfilled.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean,
That
we've
makes
we've
sense.
talked about that often on here that you have to get down to the core of how your business operates and make sure that's well defined before trying to automate anything and moving it to AI.
Mhm.
So, what does that process look like? When you've helped businesses move from you know, regular business processes into automation. What does that look like for a small to mid-sized company?
The first thing is understanding the business objective, right? What is the owner's intent and experience? We and for me in the IT world, we move away from SLAs to XLAs, the experience level agreement. And the owner says, "This is the experience I want to have." Then you have, how do my processes support that? How does my structure support that? And when I say processes, it's how do I fill out time cards? How do I run my P&L? What is my standards for account receivables, right? What is my age? You have to have defined process for every part of your business, and then your tools have to align that. So I walk them through ownership and accountability for their functional areas in their environment. Then I get them into the processes. Can someone else come in and read this documentation and do that job to get the same results? And then we get in the tools. Do the tools align with one, the goal of the experience, and two, support the processes that you want? All too often, and this is where people do, they just throw in tools and they forget about the process and documentation and the ownership, and they expect the tool to work when the tool is dependent on all these things. Because then you have your last layer, which is your performance measuring garbage, right? You're measuring inconsistent results. So therefore, you're not seeing your cost of ownership. You're not seeing your return of investment. You're not seeing your lack of efficiency.
So do you find that, this is more of an issue with smaller companies, or is this a kind of a broad stroke across a lot of businesses, whether they're, a 5-person company or a 5,000-person company?
I started off my career in the military and aerospace, right? So one of the companies I worked was 40,000, same problem as a 5-person company, right?
Yeah, that's
People
interesting.
don't change. They resist change. Even if they're in the technology industry, they resist change. And I never understood that.
That's kind of a surprising comment because I think, a lot of small businesses think, oh my goodness, the building processes and procedures is really hard. Large enterprises got it figured out. That's how they make their money. But you're saying that even large companies struggle with this just the same way.
Right. The reason why small businesses struggle more is because they're starting from scratch, right? They're trying to do this. Enterprise has stuff that they wrote back in 1954 and that have slowly evolved, right? They just can't evolve fast enough with the industry, which is why they're so siloed. Small businesses, I mean, the hard work is that first draft. Perfection it kills it. They're trying to get perfection or they're not using the right tools, especially with AI. There's so many good AI documentation tools out there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Are there tools that you found that help small businesses or businesses in general document their processes easier? I mean, we've gone through it, over and over again, developing written documentation, procedures, and
Hmm.
processes, and it's difficult. Once you get a starting point, it helps. But are there
Hmm.
tools now that help with that process, just to understand at least what we're doing today?
So what I found and what I found works the best for my clients is we'll sit here in a conversation and I have my screen recorder. I use Fathom, and we'll say, okay, now let's talk through the entire workflow. Now we've talked every touch point end to end to achieve this. Now who's owns what? What are the roles and responsibilities? Now what are our S and we will talk through it in these meetings and I'll just run it through ChatGPT or something like that. I'm like, now break out my roles and responsibilities per position, break out my end-to-end workflow, give me a visual diagram, and I just throw the transcript in there and it gives it back to me.
It's amazing. I mean,
Yeah, just talk
definitely.
it through. Talk it through.
When you have something like ChatGPT do that analysis, do you ever ask it for recommendations on improving workflow, like, a lean procedure, or Kaizen, or something like that?
Yes, with my our industry, obviously there's heavy on ITIL and there's SIS standards, there's this CSF uh, workflows that are out there that have to be tweaked for the MSP, right? Because otherwise, all everybody would be the same. So you do. There's certain prompts I put in. You need to look at this workflow and tell me what top 3 changes you would recommend to increase efficiency. Go right through it, right? And say here's where you can create the efficiency from an engineering standpoint. And then I'll use like, hey, you're Steve Jobs. I want you to look at this workflow from a user experience. What would you do differently? And you get these refinements.
Interesting. I think that's one of the important things to remember about, using AI tools is you can ask it to give different perspectives. I'm an endurance athlete and I was listening to a podcast the other day, and in this podcast they were mentioning that, you can use AI to coach you through training for an Ironman. But if you just ask it generally, it's going to pull in everybody's opinion on what it takes to be an Ironman athlete, and
Hmm.
you'll get a training plan that doesn't make any sense. So you have to be specific. I like what you said, an expert that you want to follow,
Hmm.
look at this. And when you give it that specificity, you're going to get better results. So how do I think a lot of companies initially over the last couple of years have been working with these LLMs. And some business owners just look at them as toys. Okay, it's nice for marketing, it's nice to write some letters. How do
Mhm,
you move the conversation away from it's just a toy, something to
mhm.
enhance some work, into a useful tool that can be implemented across the company?
So we have these conversations that tools are not a strategy, right? Tools are something you buy. Just like you when you work with your clients, you're not just saying here's a tool. It's hey, here's how we're going to move your business from point A to point B, right? Here are your friction points. And when you look at AI as tools, they're very siloed, right? The information sharing is not there. You're not getting the benefit of that learning. So AI is an infrastructure. So we start talking about that. A real strategy is how do you keep AI as an infrastructure to remove the friction, right, and gain that in some cases PhD level data analysis of your business across all of your business units, across all of your applications in a governed way. Without data governance, I mean, it's just a security risk. And so
I-
that's where you get to the strategy side of it. Is here's the holistic picture. Now we have a roadmap. How are we going to get there?
Perfect. And I'm glad you brought up security. So I have a couple of questions around that. Reading an article the other day that an unfortunate person, database administrator, had been using Claude on their production database, and Claude also had access to a backup database, and it went in there and wiped both databases, and they didn't have a backup because the backup was also erased. It's certainly a concern about that. So, what guardrails do you put around AI from a security standpoint inside a company to ensure that it doesn't run amok and destroy
Mhm.
things?
Well, and you do need guardrails. You have to give it a clear lane, and that is where you have to have your data loss prevention, your SOX, your access controls in place before you just release AI. And you have to keep your context centralized so it can be anonymized, and then you can control where and what when AI can go. But the one thing we have to remember, we have to treat AI like a junior employee. It cannot have keys to the kingdom, right? It's just not there yet. It can do a lot of things, but can do a lot of things wrong. So you have that access control, and you have to have that human in the middle approach for AI, right? It's that trust for verify. Do this, okay? Yep. Feed it. Don't let it feed back out unless you're having app specific solutions. Does that make sense? Don't say, hey, go read my P&L, and then if I have this much money, you go spend it.
Yeah, we were talking beforehand, about how we can automate our personal lives with
Hmm.
AI. And as, briefly listening to a discussion about it, using AI to automate, finding airline tickets and managing personal finances. And so I was listening to this conversation. That was what scared me. It's like I have no desire to give it access to look up bank account information, because
Hmm.
who knows what it will do once it has keys to the kingdom, like you said,
Right.
personal finances or from a business standpoint. It's pretty
Uh,
scary.
this is why you need to have data loss prevention and data classification. Well, it's basically you need a mature operating model where you do have structured data. I was on a podcast a few weeks ago where the company that I was on with did just structured data. They said we were just looking at the data and how do we structure it so AI can work, right? And that's an entire business now. And when you have that structured data, you can say, okay, anonymize this, prevent credit cards, prevent social security numbers, prevent email, prevent this client information. Don't allow it into QuickBooks, or you can create all of these stop gaps.
As you're putting a plan together, how does a small business decide, to put those in place? What do they, from a data governance standpoint, is it just a policy that they need to write and then incorporate in all the work they're doing in AI? Or what's the starting point for a business if they're trying to implement AI systems and automation?
It is policies. What do you want to protect? And that's a process. This is the kind of things that shouldn't happen. This is my AI acceptable usage policy. And then it's the enforcement of it, which is your platform. You have to be able to enforce what your policies are. Same thing with employees. You just don't say, hey, here's an employee handbook. I trust everything you're going to go do. Right? Employees need to be managed, and so does AI.
We've been in the industry a long time now,
Mhm.
combined 60 years between the two of us. And I think, one of the scariest things for me in the technology industry isn't what we do as technologists, but what employees do with shadow IT, using tools and systems
Mhm.
that aren't approved by the company. And I feel like it's gotten a lot easier because all these AI tools are web-based and you can link them into lots of different systems. I was asked on a webinar the other day about that. How do you prevent users from using third-party unapproved AI systems? So what's your perspective on that? How do you prevent people from doing the shadow AI work?
So people are doing it. I have a client. It's about 15 users, and of that, they had 4 different personal AI systems that they were using because they liked it. But they had Copilot for the company, and the company even had a cloud account. So it's being able to say, okay, first, again, here's the policy. Now, how are we going to enforce it? Do I blacklist the sites, right, on my firewall? Do I prevent the VPN so they can't go around it? What do I do? Well, they wouldn't have it if they had their own tool of equal value inside, right? Why would I go outside when I have my business knowledge here? Giving them a safe tool to use inside that does the same, if not better, results, then why would they go outside? Well, you do have to block it. I mean, you can't just say, here's a better tool, now go. It's, I'm not going to let you get to these in here. Only this IP can come in here and do these things. There's a lot of lockdown methodologies that you can do.
I think that's a difficult issue for IT companies now of enforcing the policy that's set in the company. You got to start with the policy first, and
Mhm,
then the IT can enforce it.
mhm.
And we have to adapt and change. Speaking of IT providers, what should a company be talking to their IT provider about AI today? What are the things that you need to be discussing with your IT provider? Because it's not the same. A lot of
Mhm.
IT providers are not offering AI services. What should you be discussing with them?
First and foremost, is my data safe? Remember, your IT provider does have the key to the kingdoms, and if they're doing AI, if they're using it, right, how are they keeping your data safe? And two, how are they helping you leverage the technology to improve their business? How are you removing friction from their business as a consultant? How are you helping them strategize? So they should ask them, what are the strategy points that we need to look at? Where are the security points we need to look at? Because the biggest threat besides employees is your IT provider.
Yeah, it's a scary thing. So you're saying it kind of a two-phase or two-pronged question.
Hmm.
It's how is the IT provider using AI inside their business?
Hmm.
That's the first thing that you need to find out. And then the second thing is how they're going to help you implement AI in your business. So
Correct.
interesting. Kind of along the same or different line here, we're talking about employees using AI, bringing in their own AI systems, but obviously there's a big concern from employees that, you're developing these procedures and automation and policies of exactly how an employee works, and you're trying to automate it in AI. And, employees come with their own knowledge base. How do
Hmm.
you improve the employee experience without worrying, making all your employees worry that they're going to be replaced by AI robots?
So, yeah, that's actually a big one because it goes back to the people, right? AI doesn't replace humans, it enhances humans if you allow it. Now, it may replace some of the things that you are doing, but it reshapes. So businesses who adopt an AI strategy relook at the roles and responsibilities. It says, well, if they don't need to do this, what else can I do to increase capacity, increase efficiency, increase experience? So when employees get behind it, says, well, now you don't have to do these. Your roles are evolving, and now you're moving into more of this. And that more of this is the things that humans need to do, right? The interaction. I read a book back in 2008 called the IT value stack. This is back in 2008. It says technology is advancing at a pace where there's only going to be 2 things left for an MSP: personalized service. How do I use this technology? And strategic guidance. How do I drive my business using technology? Right. And as we've seen, and back in 2008, there were physical servers. SaaS replaced this. A lot of middleware is going. You can auto provision servers now. I mean, there's a lot less need for the middleware engineers, so they have to become more managed intelligence providers, right? How are you helping them use the system? And your kind of level 2 systems engineer are going to be moving up more, and your help desk people are just going to get better at leveraging the technology for customers. I know this customer and their processes, so I'm going to be really good at helping them and anyone else in this vertical. So you get very much vertical specific. So it's something I read in 2008, and again, it's been holding true ever since.
And I think it's really on us, so you're talking about as kind of a division of the company, the people that are your employees that are on the upper side of the company, your engineers, your higher level, technicians, or if you're a lawyer or whatever, maybe need to
Mhm.
be the best they can be. They need to be experts and be able to manage. And then you have your customer facing people that have to be really good at customer skills and then
Mhm.
leveraging the automation that happens in between those two groups.
Correct. That those lawyers have to leverage AI to do a lot of the, well, just say grunt work. And so that vertical experience in the legal field has to be there. And then they're doing the actual human interpretation of that on how to best advise or how to best drive, or even with CPAs, how to best plan. So
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. You're launching a product and working with businesses. So tell us a little bit more about that. And I understand you got an offer you'd like to kind of present to those that are listening today.
yeah, so as AI became more of an infrastructure, I built a security first infrastructure layer that connects all the apps and data sources, your line of business apps, your SharePoints, your Dropboxes, and all this, to multi-model AI routing. So you have one subscription. It connects all your apps and data, and you have one interface that learns you, and you have all your Claudes, your chats, all these hundreds of AI models, and you don't have to choose, right? That's the biggest leverage. You don't have to choose a model; it automatically routes to the best model for the job. So this is our pre-launch. So we're offering charter memberships, which gives you 25% off for life on your subscription. And for the first 2 years, any first-party app will be free for you to use. We have about a dozen first-party apps, such as natural language dashboards. Just type what you want; they go create your dashboards. You can go to our website, highpoint.ai, highpointgroup.ai, click on charter members, and you'll see the offer.
Great. Well, that was my next question is how do they get a hold of you? So it sounds like highpoint.ai and or highpointgroup.ai that did the same thing you did. And uh, we'll put that link in the show notes and people can reach out to you. So, Joe, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I love talking about AI and how
Mhm.
businesses can leverage it. And I know it's going to change dramatically over the next few years, but I think
Mhm.
businesses that are adopting it today are going to see, huge gains in productivity and performance and certainly get themselves ready for the generations that are going to come ahead. So thank you
Right.
again joining us and your insights on the industry and changes.
All right. Thanks, Nathan. It was great to be here.
And thank you all for joining us at Stimulus Tech Talk. Make sure you like and subscribe and leave some comments if you have any questions for us about this topic. Make it a great day, everybody.